Hello and welcome back to Movie Husbands. Today we'll be reviewing Knives Out 2 Glass Onion. In Rian Johnson's sequel to Knives Out, tech billionaire Miles Braun invites his friends for a getaway on his private Greek island. When someone turns up dead, Detective Benoit Blanc is on the case again. The film stars Daniel Craig, Janelle Monáe, Edward Norton, and many, many more. So Matt, what did you think of Glass Onion?
I absolutely love this movie. Rian Johnson crushed it. I am so excited to talk about this film because I just had such a blast. This movie was smart, it was witty, it was absolutely hilarious, and not only were we laughing during this entire movie, but the entire theater was packed with people who were in tears at times with how funny this film was. What I love so much about this film is just the lines that are drawn in these characters right from the beginning. They're pretty shitty people. I think in comparison to the first Knives Out, there was a little bit of a hesitancy on the part of Rian Johnson to tell us who was good, who was bad, what were their motives. And this film, you kind of learn these people are pretty shitty people right from the get-go. I love how this film pretty much just rips apart these antagonists. I think there's multiple antagonists in this film. Yeah. Of course, for the main antagonist, that person is ripped absolutely to shreds by the end of this film. And the protagonist is just lifted in a way in such a bombastic fashion by the end of this movie that I just enjoyed every single second of it. I wouldn't cut anything from this film, and this movie really feels like a breeze. Yeah. And I think that's something that Rian Johnson in particular does so well at. His movies are so creative and packed with little details that you're really hanging on to every single frame. And by the end of the film, I was just ready for more. I was ready for more Knives Out films. I was ready for more Benoit Blanc and all the other supporting cast members. I know they switch out for every single movie, but I think with the first Knives Out, they absolutely nailed these characters, which in this film are more just characters.
You know what's interesting is, like, if you went to me now and you said, name 10 favorite directors working right now, I'm not really sure that I would think of Rian Johnson, but if you look at his filmography, he's been giving us consistent mainstream hits for like 15 years now. And I'm not sure why he hasn't, in my mind, I'm as guilty as just about everybody else, been elevated to the pantheon of great directors, because especially in the mainstream, we don't see a lot of films that ourselves and our parents will enjoy as equally. And this is the first thing I thought of, like, this movie is going to come out around Christmas on Netflix, and you could see yourself being with your family, the kids go to bed and say, let's put on an adult movie that we're all going to enjoy. Knives Out 2 is that movie. Everyone will love this movie, and it is very, very well made. It's very intelligent. It's very, very funny. The first film was a blast, and it was funny at times, but you were laughing mostly of this recognition of just how fun everything is, whereas this movie is a mystery, but it's an outright comedy. And do you remember what I always say is my number one rule for comedy?
That the characters have to be people you don't like.
Yeah, everyone in this movie sucks so much that as an audience member, it is just simply fun to laugh at them. It actually reminded me of, in a way, Don't Look Up, which you and I didn't like at all. That movie had this pretentiousness that I felt as an audience member laughing at certain characters. Even though they're caricatures, they're fleshed out enough, and you actually know people who say the exact lines that these people say in your life, unfortunately, or on Twitter. It feels so relieving to laugh at these idiots and to see, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, to see some of them get their comeuppance in a certain way.
It's funny, I don't think of Don't Look Up very often, and after this movie, I actually thought of Don't Look Up as well, because this movie just so perfectly takes these people who are just such idiots and douchebags and tears them down in a way that just shows them for the children that they are and the unseriousness that they have about life because they just care about themselves.
Yeah, and a lot of these things we hear in entrepreneurship, like industry disruptors, and like a lot of these funny things that we see on Twitter of these people in their own bubble of frankly, just seeing it skewered so perfectly in this movie and seeing all of these bubbles that these people are in collide at once and all be like silently and hilariously taken down. It was something to see. And we're not even getting to how complicated and evolved and interesting the mystery is. We didn't even get to that yet. We're just still at the satire part.
And there is a little bit there as to that satire of why these people are so douchey in the first place, because they all pretty much came from a place of nothing. It's very much under the surface, just but how power corrupts people. Mostly corrupts stupid people. But there is a couple of smart people in here that know what they're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
That you can see that they have a bit of hesitancy about the decisions that they've made. And then there's other cast members that are just so oblivious and stupid to all of it. I think this movie so perfectly does that with these characters. And they're not difficult characters to understand. They're very simple. They're very easily drawn and right to the point from the very beginning. So there isn't much nuance to them at all, but that's the point. Going on to the mystery, I think in comparison to the first Knives Out, I wouldn't say this one was as mysterious to me. I think I was able to pick out a little bit more of where the story was going. There was a lot of twists and turns that I actually expected during the theater. I think that's because the protagonist and the antagonist are so clearly drawn at the beginning of the movie that there's only one particular way that it could have gone.
Yeah, sure.
But with that said, I didn't care. I didn't care if I figured out the story or figured out the mystery or the little pieces of it. It was such a fun ride that it didn't matter. And also, I think it was very intentional that it was doing that it wasn't really focused as much on the mystery as it was on the satire.
Yeah, and it is called Glass Onion, and there's many references to how things are hidden in plain sight. I mean, the killer, quote unquote, in this movie is hidden in plain sight, along with a lot of other things. But I think I'm going to steal something that you said to me after the movie, is that the movie is so densely written that there's going to be a detail that you forget here somewhere that's going to surprise you in the way that it comes back. I almost like play dumb during movies like this because the surprise is so much fun to me that I don't really sit there and actively say, how do I figure this out? So I was surprised by a lot of plot elements towards the end, but just seeing them come back one by one, almost falling like dominoes at the end was like, wow. And the first hour of the film is really good and it's very funny, but around like the 30-minute to maybe 60-minute mark, it to me is a little slow. But when you see where the film is going, and the film has a very clever way, kind of like the first movie, the film has a very clever way that a lot of perspectives are reframed in the first hour, that when you look back on it, you say, oh, okay, that's pretty funny. That I think that 30 minutes is actually going to breeze by pretty nicely on a second viewing. But it's so intelligently written. I can't believe that he wrote this by himself and that he thought of all of these things himself in a room somewhere. I was reading an interview with him in the New York Times, and he's like, anyone that says they like writing is crazy. It's awful. It's like writing is so bad. And the person said to him, the interviewer said, so does that mean that you're more interested maybe later in taking on other people's scripts and other people's writing? He's like, oh, God, no. He's a really funny and charming and just really innocent guy that just seems to love filmmaking and love making these kinds of films, and you feel it, like it is permeating off of the screen.
Yeah, there's so much intention in this film, I was saying earlier, in terms of the script and its writing, and the set design is so fantastic in this movie. It literally encapsulates everything that these characters are.
And becomes important to the plot in many ways.
And becomes important to the plot in many ways. And the lines, like you said, how some were forgotten because there's so many packed in there. One in particular, if you've seen the movie, you'll get it. If you haven't, you'll figure out eventually. But like the Mona Lisa line that comes up multiple times in the film, it just repeats itself. But there's so many things just like that I forgot about the Mona Lisa line, and then when it keeps coming back, it kept surprising me. Also, we have to get to the actors in this movie because this is a stacked cast, even if it's a little minor role where you just show up as a little cameo. I understand perfectly why Daniel Craig said he would keep playing this character forever and just do as many of these movies as he wants, because this looks like a blast to make and put together.
I think in the first film, he had these kind of eccentricities that he was a little odd, right? But we get a better sense, I think, of his character and some of those eccentric flourishes as he's in this environment because he doesn't quite fit in. We see him not really be the master of his domain the way he was in the first movie, but a little bit more of a fish out of water. He's a little bit more bumbling. He's a little bit more uncomfortable and awkward. He is just following people around and they're noticing and they think he's weird. So I think that our expectations of Benoit Blanc and a lot of the funny facets of his character are used to add this added layer of humor to the story that I really liked.
I would say, second-handedly, Janelle Monáe is just absolutely stunning in this movie. I can't get over her because her presence and her body language is so specific in this film. I love how well she plays this, that you can just have one look at her and understand her in this particular way.
I would really love if Janelle Monáe came out of nowhere and got a supporting actress nomination at the Oscars. I mean, I bet there will be a push for that. I don't know if she'll get in, but it has all of those tenets of a great supporting performance with all of these kind of different avenues that she has to play.
Going from there, I think Dave Bautista is absolutely hilarious. He plays this guy that is like this pro-man.
He's like an Andrew Tate stand-in.
Yeah, and he is just obsessed with his gun, which is another thing about this film. Oh gosh, this is just opening up a bunch of things. But the way that suspense is built in this film, either with Dave Bautista's gun and how it's shot off at random times. There's this thing with the Mona Lisa and the glass case that it's in and how it opens and it closes. And there's this beautiful scene where the tension is just being built with that. And then, oh my gosh, I need to go through some of these actors because there's so many and I want to just mention some of them. Jessa Henwick plays Peg. She plays the assistant to Kate Hudson's Bertie J. And she is just there to help her with her modeling career in a way.
Voice of reason.
Be a voice of reason.
Put out literal fires. Figurative and literal.
And then Edward Norton, of course, plays Miles Braun, which is definitely a play on Elon Musk.
And only becomes more prescient by the hour.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, if you think about it, this movie was filmed, what, a year and a half ago?
I know.
2 years ago?
Watching an arrogant billionaire undo himself from his own stupidity. Yeah.
Kathryn Hahn plays Claire DeBella. She is Connecticut's governor. We live in Connecticut, so I found that absolutely hilarious.
That was really funny.
And so she has something to protect in terms of her reputation. It's pretty much a reputation thing. All these people have built their reputations off the back of Miles.
I don't want to spoil who it is, but there's a famous tennis player that has the funniest cameo I've ever seen. So sometimes cameos in films, the way that they work is like, look at me, I'm a cameo. This movie, the way that they use cameos is so funny. It has that meta, extremely witty quality that it's also adding to the themes in a certain way, adding to this like rich, snobbish nonsense that all of these people are engrossed in.
So true. There's also Leslie Odom Jr. plays Lionel. He's another guy in this mix that has something to protect. He actually works for Miles Braun. So he is the scientist that develops all these cool technologies that Miles pretty much just takes advantage of. I would say one of the fantastic things about this film is that it hit every single time for me. Everything that was intended to be funny was funny.
There's so many jokes kind of stacked on top of one another. There's these great visual gags in the background that I wonder if there's more I missed, but like when they're on the Zoom calls or FaceTime, whatever it is in the early part of the film, there's all these funny things going on in the background. Her assistant running around with the fire extinguisher. There's, at one point, there's a droid that walks through with all of their luggage. We watch films that are maybe like 4 times this film's budget and you say like, where did that money go? But here you say, wow, they really used that money and stretched it, and all of it made sense to the themes, all of it made sense to the humor and the plot. It's just really good.
All right, so you ready to go to grades?
Yeah, I'm gonna give this an A-. I'm not really sure why I'm not giving it an A. Maybe...
Well, give it an A.
Well, I have this suspicion that it was so much fun in the theater that as I watch it, I may not be able to replicate that blast feel that I felt. I mean, this is undoubtedly going to be in my top 10 list for the end of the year. It's very, very rare that a sequel makes my top 10 list. I mean, I think maybe the last one could have been The Last Jedi, which is kind of funny, another Rian Johnson film. I can't think of a time that I had more fun at the movies this year. Maybe Everything Everywhere All at Once rivals it, but I actually think this is more fun. It's playing for the next couple days in theaters. See it if you can. It's only playing in 600 theaters, but it's worth maybe a 20-minute drive to go see this in theaters. And worst case scenario, watch it with your family when it comes out on Christmas, because it is just great.
I completely agree. It's almost as if everything on screen is happening so flawlessly, but it doesn't take itself too seriously either. So it's just such a fun ride. I give this movie an A. I think you should change your grade to an A, but that's not my problem. I don't really have anything else to add. I just absolutely had a blast with this movie. Everything that you just said in the end, I think, puts it so well. Rian Johnson is just, he is really crushing it now, and I can't wait for another one of these movies.
I think Rian Johnson was tasked with, how do I replicate the first film and give people what they want in a Knives Out film, but also challenge them enough that they're going to be surprised. And it is just spellbinding how he was able to pull that off. And that's it for our review of Knives Out 2 Glass Onion. What did you think of Glass Onion? Let us know in the comments. Check it out in theaters if you can, and if not, on Netflix, and we will see you in the next one.